I know you. I know you got to be somewhere at once, so we're gonna really try to knock this out. Thank you so much for taking the time out to be. But I wanted to start off by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what your job really entails.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here today. My name is Ben Marcus, and I serve as the Religious Literacy Specialist at the Religious Freedom Center, which is part of the Freedom Forum Institute in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So we're based in D.C. We're currently housed in the newseum, but separate from it. And my job as the Religious Literacy Specialist is to think about how to train and equip educators to teach about religion in academically rigorous and constitutionally appropriate ways. Okay. So we're a nonpartisan, non-sectarian center. We are not affiliated with any religious organization or political organization, but we're committed to cultivating 3 competencies of legal literacy about the First Amendment, religious literacy so that people understand how religion operates in private and public life, and the skills of civil dialogue.
Okay, so that's great. It sounds like a lot. You have your cup full, your hands full with everything that you do.
Yeah.
So diving right into the topic for today, President Trump sent out a tweet that stirred up a lot of controversy about teaching the Bible in schools, as having it as a course. Talk to us about why this is such a controversial topic.
Sure. So a lot of people are very passionate about this topic because it gets at the heart of what public education is about, what it means to train and equip our students to live in a religiously diverse society. Mm-hmm. And it's become quite a polarized political issue as well. The facts are that you can already teach about the Bible in public schools. That is constitutional, but it's become very politicized. And so this is really a symbolic move for people who are supporters of President Trump, who have bought into a narrative of decline and restoration, or are interested in seeing not only just religion broadly, but specifically Protestant Christianity or Christianity generally in public schools taught as a way of cultivating character or moral education. Many people see this as a return to a sort of mythic past in which all students learned about Christianity in public schools, which was never really quite the case. For a very long time now, people have had the option of teaching about the Bible in public schools, but they have not always taken advantage of that. So it's really a symbolic gesture towards a conservative Christian base who would like to see a devotional form of Christianity back in public schools.
Okay. But I know some might actually say that, okay, if people want their kids to learn about the Bible in schools, they should rather put them in a different kind of school or have them do that in the church. What is your take on that, or how are schools able to really incorporate it so that it remains a historical type of text or teaching, and without people taking it the moral way of the Bible?
Sure. So at the center, we differentiate between 2 key ways of phrasing the conversation or framing the conversation. One is teaching the Bible, and the other is teaching about the Bible. Okay. Or you can also think of teaching religion or teaching about religion. So when you're teaching religion, that's more of a devotional or confessional form of education. It's something that might happen in a Sunday school or in a mosque or synagogue or gurdwara. It's the way of trying to promote one form of way of being religious. Sometimes it involves denigrating or denying the legitimacy of other ways of being religious. It's trying to have students or individuals conform to one way of being religious. So it's the way of growing someone within a specific religious tradition. Teaching about religion or teaching about the Bible is not about promoting or denigrating one way of being religious or promoting or denigrating one way of interpreting the Bible. Rather, it's about trying to understand how religion operates in private and public life. It's about trying to understand the literary and historic qualities of the Bible so that you're better equipped to understand society. So because religion continues to play a role in public life, whether we ourselves are religious or not, it's important to understand what the Bible is, what the stories and narratives of the Bible are, in order to make sense of the world around us. So that's one common justification for teaching about the Bible or teaching about religion in public schools. However, there are parents who are rightly concerned that teaching about religion or teaching about the Bible does not become confessional in nature. That is unconstitutional. It is not allowed to promote one way of being religious or another, and that is something that's better kept in churches or at home. We recognize that many people see it as important to do that kind of confessional education. Yeah. That's certainly their right. It's their free exercise right to do so, but that does not belong in a public school.
Right. So what states are actually taking this on now? I know Kentucky is one of those states. What other states have taken this on, and what kind of feedback have they been getting about this?
Yeah, there are a number of states that have introduced Bible legislation into their chambers, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. It is across the country. It includes states like Texas, North Carolina, Kentucky, West Virginia, one of the Dakotas, if I'm not mistaken. So it's across the country. Again, sometimes those are successful and sometimes they aren't. But what's important to remember is that they don't necessarily need to do this. They don't need these bills in order to be able to teach about the Bible or about religion. In fact, there was a Supreme Court case in 1963 called Abington v. Shemp. And in that Supreme Court case, the court struck down the devotional reading of the Bible. They said you're not allowed, as the school cannot sponsor or force students to read the Bible devotionally. Right. However, it's important to remember that students have their own free exercise right, that if they'd like to, they can read the Bible devotionally in schools. That is certainly their right as people to do. Right. But the school cannot force them to do it. But in the same case that struck down school-sponsored devotional reading of the Bible, the majority opinion made sure to state that nothing in the opinion says that schools cannot teach about the Bible as part of a study for its literary or historic qualities, as part of a secular program of education to understand the history of this country and of other countries in the quote-unquote West. So we can already teach about the Bible in schools. So when these states are introducing Bible legislation, it's really a symbolic gesture.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure you get this question a lot. What about people that are not Christians? Let's say Muslims. How have they taken this? And I know Bible courses in public schools is being offered as an elective.
That's right.
So, but how have people that are not Christians taken to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Many of them are uncomfortable with it. Some people are comfortable with it. So it really depends on the person. Some people recognize that in order to understand certain manifestations of religion in public life in the United States, the Bible is particularly helpful. Understanding the Bible is particularly helpful for understanding the majority of religious allusions in public life. However, that does not always give a sense of inclusivity when you're only teaching about the Bible. So at the center, a lot of the work that I do is not just focused on teaching about the Bible, but teaching about religion more broadly. So how can you teach about religion? And that includes not just also Islam, as well as Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and people from non-religious communities, humanists, atheists, etc., and more, in order to get a more full sense of how religion operates, not only in the United States, but abroad, and also to communicate very clearly that the state is not favoring one religion over another. Okay. It's not favoring religion over non-religion or vice versa.
I read up about the Project Blitz.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that and what role that plays in teaching the Bible in schools?
Sure. So it's not a subject that I'm a complete expert in. There's a really great article by Mark Chancey in the Washington Post that touches on Project Blitz. But what Project Blitz is it's an organization that's supported by a coalition of groups on the religious right, the Christian religious right, okay, that creates sample legislation that legislators in states can then adopt and introduce as bills into their states' legislatures to promote different agenda items on the Christian religious right. So that includes, for example, legislation to promote Bible literacy courses in schools. However, it's generally understood that the Bible literacy courses supported by Project Blitz are not neutral in the way that the Constitution requires.
Okay.
So that's certainly a challenge by that legislation. But then they also have other legislation that does not just touch on Bible literacy. They have legislation that promotes, tries to enshrine in God we trust language. They have legislation that clearly targets LGBT Americans, calling out their right, for example, to trying to deny their right to adopt, same-sex couples to adopt, trying to deny the right for trans individuals to have their identity cards match their gender identity. So these are different agenda items by a coalition of organizations on the religious right, and Bible literacy is one of these. And
Okay.
again,
So it's broader what they do, not just about Bible literacy.
that's correct.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the organization ALEC. ALEC is a conservative organization that creates bills, or I guess the text of drafts of things that can be introduced as bills by local legislators that promote especially a pro-business agenda, or what they say is a pro-business agenda. So this is in some ways a cultural and religious analog. So it's an organization that centrally creates text that then can be introduced by legislators to promote a religious right agenda.
Yeah. So, but with this topic now surfacing, and I know it's not a new topic, but the fact that President Trump tweeted it a few days ago kind of brought it back to the forefront. Do you think this is more a political thing? Because the Democratic Party, and somewhat, they do agree with it, and they kind of fall back and they come back again. Do you think this time around that we're looking at something that's going to stick, or is it just for the meantime being political?
It's unfortunate because my full-time day job is promoting the academic study of religion in schools. It's something I believe in very, very strongly, that we should be learning about religion in schools. And that includes sacred narratives and sacred texts in order to understand how religion operates in private and public life. Unfortunately, this tweet is part of the politicization of education about religion, seeks to fit it in with a certain narrative about this loss of Christian identity in the United States that makes my job very challenging. So I do think that we will see, I don't know for how long, but this has certainly created enough of a buzz that many people are coming out against the tweet and coming out even forcefully against education about the Bible in schools. I don't think it's appropriate to totally remove study of the Bible in public schools, but we do have to think very carefully about how we're going to teach about the Bible.
Is it of any consideration at all to teach, the Quran in schools? Or that topic been brought up, or is not up for discussion at all?
It has been brought up. It is not supported by organizations that have the same kind of resources as Project Blitz or others. So there are certainly already many teachers that I know across the country in states as varied as Georgia, Illinois, Virginia, Maryland, California, who are already teaching about these other sacred texts in public schools. Even in Washington, D.C., where I live, there are teachers who are already teaching about these other sacred texts in public schools in a very academic and appropriate way. But there's not a national movement in the way that there is for teaching about the Bible.
Oh, okay. All right. That's interesting. So is there anywhere we could find more information just to follow this story a little bit more?
Sure. So Mark Chancey is one of the leading scholars in the country. He's based at Southern Methodist University. He's active on Twitter, and he's a great source of information about updates on Bible literacy courses in schools. You can check out the organization I work for, the Religious Freedom Center, which has a lot of training programs and curricular resources for educators who want to teach about religion or about the Bible or other sacred texts in an academic way. The Society of Biblical Literature is the largest professional association in the country for scholars who teach about and study the Bible from an academic perspective, and they have a number of different resources for how to teach about the Bible, including an excellent online resource called BibleOdyssey.org. It's free, it's vetted by scholars, created by scholars for teachers who want to teach about the Bible academically. Those are some great places to go if you're looking to have resources, if you're a teacher and you want to be teaching about religion, or if you want updates about what's happening in this field.
One more question. When you say teaching the Bible academically in schools, are the teachers trained on how to do that? So there's not like a line between, okay, this is my belief, I'm imposing that on you, I'm teaching you that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So in this field, that's one of the main challenges, is that teachers graduate from teacher education programs without necessarily having the background to teach about the Bible or about religion. But when they enter a social studies classroom, they're then expected to teach about religion because it's in state standards or because it's in textbooks, and so they have to start teaching about the issue. So what we do at the center is we try to provide in-service education for in-service educators who are interested in teaching about religion. We're trying to move into the pre-service education space. Many teachers go into the classroom without necessarily having that training. There are guidelines now for how to assess whether students have the disciplinary concepts and tools of religious studies that they need in order to study religion. Those came out of the National Council for the Social Studies, but there are not generally agreed upon guidelines for what teachers should know in terms of specific guidelines adopted by mainstream education organizations. So that's something that remains to be seen in this field.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll keep on following your work and see how this progresses as the time goes on. But thank you so much, because I know you have a meeting at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Ben was gracious enough to join us today to shed some more light on the tweet that President Trump tweeted the other day about Bible literacy in schools. This particular show will live on YouTube. I am going to record it and put it on YouTube in a few hours. Okay, so thank you so much, Ben, for taking the time out, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
All right, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.